Hi, I'm Mary Mancini, your Tennessee Democratic Party Chair. And this is If You Don't Know, Now You Know, a TNDP podcast. Recorded live from the Tennessee State Capitol in Nashville, we'll be speaking with lawmakers, activists, and candidates, people who can tell you and show you how the laws are made that affect our lives. There's no shortage of issues to be covered about freedom, opportunity, equity, justice, and safety, and we'll hustle to keep you in the loop. Hey there, it's Mary Mancini, your Tennessee Democratic Party Chair, and this is If You Don't Know, Now You Know, a TNDP podcast. Today we're sitting down with Francie Hunt, Executive Director of Tennessee Advocates for Planned Parenthood, to talk about the state of women's health care and reproductive rights in Tennessee. Welcome.
Hello.
So you are the ED, Executive Director of Tennessee Advocates for Planned Parenthood. And before we go ahead and dive into the issues surrounding reproductive rights and women's health in Tennessee, can you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and how you became passionate about this issue, these issues, and also maybe the difference between the organizations affiliated with Planned Parenthood in Tennessee?
Sure. Well, I'll start with that part.
Okay.
So there's two organizations to share with you today about Planned Parenthood here in Tennessee. There's the organization Planned Parenthood of Tennessee and North Mississippi. They're a 501c3 organization. Our organization through PPT&M have 4 health centers that they take care of and provide health services, which is a range of health services from family planning and STI, STD testing and treatment, trans care, abortion, a whole range of comprehensive sexual and
screenings.
Yeah, exactly. Reproductive health. And then the other organization is called Tennessee Advocates for Planned Parenthood, which is the advocacy and political arm for Planned Parenthood here in Tennessee. So, and that is what I work with mostly, which is making sure that good bills pass at the state legislature and the bad ones don't. And helping.
How's that going? Okay,
that's a challenge.
Yeah.
And we build organization and our voice across the state on our issues and then work with partners across the board so we can help support a stronger progressive infrastructure in the state as well.
And we've known each other for a while, and you've been doing this work for a while, and you're very passionate about it. What got you involved? And, you've made this your life's work, and you're committed to it.
Yeah,
How did
absolutely.
that happen?
Well, I would say, my roots are really in child advocacy and in general feminism. When I was in Florida, I was a teacher for young ones and, just felt that, my calling is to help young people develop to their fullest human potential. And with that education advocacy and child advocacy, got a chance to come here after having been the president of the National Organization for Women on my college campus in Florida to coming to Tennessee to help build up a strong advocacy base for children's issues. And so worked for many, many years, over a decade, helping to improve public education, helping reduce school overcrowding in Rutherford County, helping Shelby County schools and Memphis City schools get more funding for their schools, worked with Governor Bredesen to expand pre-kindergarten to 18,000 4-year-olds that were at risk and making sure that they had good, solid pre-kindergarten. And so it was a natural transition to come into Planned Parenthood because we take parenthood very seriously. And one of the ways that you can be intentional is to plan for it. We're for that. And so I saw that going from a child advocacy base into Planned Parenthood was a seamless transition. Also worked with Communities in Schools, which is a national nonprofit that brings nonprofit services into the schools, working with social workers so that our young people, in addition to getting academic supports, have a full wraparound service for them to make sure that they're healthy and that they're being fed and they're being cared for, because those things are also parts of supporting and promoting good learning. So here within Planned Parenthood, if we know that health education is critical, we know that education is a key piece to making sure that people live long and healthy lives. We also know that to the extent that parenthood can be planned, those families are intentional and they can help increase the level of support that they can bring young people. And I think that's really important when we think about truly supporting life at its fullest in our world today.
So Planned Parenthood does so much for women, young women and men, and not just young in general. So much, and you mentioned, health screenings and preventative care and treatment for sexually transmitted diseases and providing affordable contraception. But it often is the organization that gets sort of painted with only providing abortions, right?
Right.
So we're going to talk about mostly today the issue of abortion in Tennessee. But it's important, I think, for our listeners to remember that Planned Parenthood is so much more than that. Right?
Absolutely. Yep.
Conservatives repeatedly reference 60 million abortions since Supreme Court's Roe v. Wade decision in 1973. I think what they fail to realize is that there were at least 60 million illegal abortions in the United States between 1900 and 1973. In 1900 alone, there were medical estimates of 1 million illegal abortions a year. Between 1900 and 1920, there were tremendous advances in medical knowledge in terms of reproduction and contraception, so that after 1920, modern families had fewer children, and that was just a natural outgrowth of that. There was a study that was done by Dr. Taussig, he's a professor of gynecology at Washington University Medical School, that he published as a medical text in 1936 that showed contraception rates the lowest in American history in that year. But illegal abortions were still about 400,000 annually, with a 1.8, almost 2% maternal mortality rate. His findings showed at that time, in 1936, that 50% of abortions were performed by physicians, 20% by persons not medically qualified to perform the procedure, and 30% were self-induced. In 1963 alone, let's fast forward about 30 years, medical estimates of illegal abortions exceeded 1 million annually, and 300,000 women were admitted to hospital septic abortion wards across the United States. So if you do the math, after 1973 and the Roe decision, it probably kept about 15 million women out of the septic abortion wards, right? So many lives were probably saved because of that. What influenced the 7 out of the 9 men on the Supreme Court at that time to vote in favor of Roe was those medical studies, right? And the Southern Baptist Convention were also influenced by those medical studies. And they actually sided with the Supreme Court in 73. It seems because many of their ministers actually cared for families that were suffering because of illegal abortions or self-induced abortions. So there's a medical history of unintended pregnancies and illegal abortion that we rarely talk about when we're actually fighting for reproductive health. But it's important also to know that history, but also to understand that, and you can probably correct me on this if I'm wrong, but abortion is a static percentage of unwanted pregnancies. And it's been like that for a long, long time, right? And it sort of just follows the natural trajectory of the advances that we've made in contraception and family planning. But it's not been reduced significantly, right? So I think what we're learning, and the point I'm trying to make, is really if our conservative friends wanted to really reduce the number of unintended pregnancies, they would work with Planned Parenthood and other organizations to actually provide things like age-appropriate reproductive health education, right, including abstinence. You know, they would work with you all and other organizations to provide comprehensive reproductive health, affordable contraception for everyone, right? So there are ways that it can be done without having to go back to pre-Roe when more women's lives were in danger and the number of actual abortions was not less than it is traditionally, historically.
Right.
So keeping that in mind and just kind of setting the stage for what we're going to continue to talk about, what is the history of reproductive rights specifically in Tennessee? In 2010, states started to pass laws to ban abortion, right? What's happened in Tennessee since sort of the 2010 era, and what does it look like now in 2020? The legislature's in session now. What's going on now?
Right.
That's a lot to unpack.
No, I love that. I love that you gave that history because, you know, there's lots to unpack there. One is that the faith community, which is now become really a wedge issue in a lot of ways, like dividing off the faith community from a lot of progressive values, including bodily autonomy. Those are the very people that actually worked in support of reproductive rights back in the day because they saw so many people dying from illegal abortions. And those were the places where women would go for sanctuary and for help when they needed care. So it's become, unfortunately, healthcare has become a politicized issue. And there's a lot to look into there. But I think what we've seen is that even well-meaning people that have whatever their opinions are around abortion, it's become a way to divide people. I guess my personal view overall is that as we look to protect democracy and make it healthier and make it something that's functional, regardless of who wins elections this year, we have a lot of work to do to actually heal at the grassroots levels, ways that we can actually promote policies that impact all of us. And so abortion has become one of these very divisive issues that becomes code for a whole range of identities that people plug into, that you're a good person or you're a bad person. And versus really looking at it in terms of what does it do to actually help people. We see a lot of what I would call like fake policies that are anti-abortion on the Hill that are just really a way to signal to their base that they're kind of doing something, even though in reality it's at best not really doing anything at all, or actually harming, harming women's health. And so, to your question in terms of the history, back in 2014, when I got involved here in Tennessee with Planned Parenthood, there was the ballot initiative, and it was essentially a referendum to change the Constitution to give our state legislators the constitutional authority to restrict or ban abortion for any reason. At the time, the Right to Life movement said, it's just so that we could, quote unquote, pass some reasonable restrictions, which we knew was not true. And we've been right. It narrowly passed. And certainly they not only passed things like politically scripted informed consent, which is political language that doctors are now required to say to patients.
What makes it political?
It's not scripted by physicians in terms of like what the real risks are. And we've seen in different places where, a lot of times like it will not actually reflect real risks. It's just like politicized risks, like saying that if you have abortions, you're going to get breast cancer and things like that, which are actually unfounded scientifically. Really, it's coercive language. We're seeing that, for example, there's legislation this year that would require abortion facilities to put up signage about notifying people that you can actually, if you're getting a medical abortion, that can be chemically reversed, which is actually not true. And the research that has happened has shown that it's actually very bad for the woman's health. So like that's what I mean, where it's like politicians kind of dictating what the health regulations need to be versus like having doctors have that relationship with the patient and figuring out what's best for them.
That is okay. So that's another reason why politicians should not be involved in this decision, right? This is something that it's difficult, should be made between a woman,
right,
her family, her faith, her doctor, right? No politician should be in the middle of this for all of those reasons that you just said.
I mean, they also passed a 48-hour waiting period. They're saying, it'll allow a woman a chance to think about what she's about to do, which is disrespectful given that women come to this decision after considering it heavily. And what ends up happening instead is that it requires when you talk about 48 hours, it requires 2 visits to the doctor. That means for that person, they're having to arrange childcare or take time off work. They're having to travel and that sort of thing. And the other thing I think that a lot of folks don't realize is that the opposition, I would say, have like a stereotype of like who this person is that has an abortion. And they like to categorize them as like the evil, they say this, you're wicked, you're a Jezebel, you're a whore. And these are women that the majority of them already have children. So they're making this decision because this is something that's best for their family. And there's lots of reasons women consider when they're deciding whether they want to carry to term, if they want to give up for adoption, or if they want to terminate the pregnancy. And our position is when you look at abortion as a moral decision, I mean, that's a very deeply personal thing. So we're not going to tell people what their moral code needs to be related to abortion. If they think it's wrong, if they think it's right, that's none of our business. What we're saying is that those private medical decisions need to be left up to a woman, her family, faith, and doctor without any government interference. Because any decision regarding a person's pregnancy, that has to be in the private realm and not given over to our politicians. I mean, that's essentially a power grab over our own sovereignty, our bodily sovereignty. And, we won't stand for that, obviously. So, in that, waiting period, that 48-hour waiting period, we're seeing that these legislators are essentially coercing their political motivations into our lives versus really thinking through like what's the best for our health. Because what happens when you wait 48 hours? You're delaying a procedure to be made later on, and that can be challenging for sure.
On a number of different levels.
Yeah.
There's a lot of privilege that's involved in that as well.
Yeah.
I think you mentioned it earlier. Not everybody has transportation. I mean, think about people that live in rural parts of the state and what they would have to go through to actually go see a doctor twice, right? It's, you mentioned childcare, but it's transportation. It's taking time off from work and having their pay docked. And I mean, there's so many things that our legislators don't seem to be able to think through because of all the posturing.
Yeah.
Again, I don't think it can be said enough that there are ways to reduce the number of unintended pregnancies, and you can't have it both ways, right? You can't limit age-appropriate reproductive health education in schools and affordable contraception and then expect there to just be, magically be fewer unintended pregnancies. It just doesn't happen.
Right.
And I've got to ask, has there been any, I know I had this conversation with a Republican lately about age-appropriate reproductive health education, and, the knee-jerk response is, well, what if the parent doesn't want it, right? Well, the parent can opt out then.
That's right.
That's, I think, the most important thing. And again, it's about education.
And there's actually a really great bill, Senator Ackberry and who else? There were two legislators in Memphis that are actually pushing for a sex education bill this year, which looks great. It will help open up more access so young people can learn about healthy decision making and their bodies and those sorts of things. So I mean, I hope all the listeners can kind of track that bill and just kind of see who's voting for it and who's not.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm excited to say, like, we're pushing a bill that would kind of indicate pregnancy as a pre-existing condition that is protected and is covered through health insurance. Also to make sure that enrollment stays open for pregnant people. So if they're uninsured, they're able to get on and covered. And I'll be curious to see, for those who kind of espouse, being so for life and for babies, if they're going to pass that, because it's obviously a revenue neutral position. And to me, a no-brainer.
It's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Right. So Governor Lee recently introduced, I can't even say it's legislation, right?
No.
Because there's just nothing there. He just he was having trouble because he had made some other decisions about, this is how politically crass things are, but he made some other decisions that were angering far extreme Republicans to accept refugees, right? He said, we're going to accept refugees into the state, which angered a bunch of people. And he had to sort of do something that would get people back excited again, right? These most extreme people in the state. And so he went on stage with about 30 Republican legislators.
Oh, I was there.
Oh, you were there.
Yeah.
So tell us.
With my beautiful little baby niece on my hip. It was really fun watching the whole thing.
It's not even a plan. It was just kind of theater, political theater. But can you walk us through what they're trying to do with that and what Planned Parenthood is also trying to do to prevent that?
Yeah.
To stop it. What is it?
Well, it was, that I had heard that theory too, that it was like based on kind of a reaction to the refugee stance. Just again, like if we were to completely be not partisan about this at all, you just kind of, is that the way we make policies in reaction to, another policy? Like we're going to make a healthcare bill based on another policy. Anyway, the whole thing was questionable because the governor, one of his privileges as governor is that he doesn't have to rush to pass a bill. I mean, he could drop a bill anytime. He doesn't have to adhere to the bill deadline like every other legislator, right?
Okay, so that's important for people to know, right? There is a deadline in each General Assembly session where it's the last day for you to introduce new legislation. And then that's a cutoff, and then you're done, and you just the legislature just works on everything that's been filed.
Exactly. So it's a little bizarre that, if you can imagine, we were all sitting there, we're like, ooh, we want to hear this press conference. What's in this bill? And he announces like, this is what I believe in, and we're about to pass this bill, and the reporters are there asking like, so what is this bill? And well, we haven't written it yet. Well, what's going to be in the bill then? Well, we don't know. It'd be like the mayor of Nashville having a big press conference saying, we're going to work on a transit plan. And the reporter going, great, what's the transit plan? It's to reduce traffic. Great. Well, how are you going to do that? Well, we're going to get back to you on that. That was what it felt like. It was just, so it's kind of hard to comment on it because nobody's seen the legislation, and from what I had heard, it was almost like he kind of went door to door almost in the legislature to kind of see what would win individuals over to kind of stand up there to pass an omnibus bill, if you will. I understand that it's kind of based off of a Missouri bill, which is very problematic legally, obviously. When Tennessee Right to Life and Planned Parenthood are both of the entities saying this is a terrible idea because it's unconstitutional and fiscally irresponsible, I think people need to listen. I mean, to be clear, like, it is not Planned Parenthood's like our talking point to say that it's, unconstitutional. Like, that's actually a reality. It's just a fact. Every state that has tried something like this where,
what are the specifics in Missouri, just so we can get an idea?
Yeah, so there's a couple components. It's what I'd call like a ladder provision. So it's like, we're going to outlaw abortion at 6 weeks or when a heartbeat is detected. And if that's found unconstitutional, it's like, oh, well then, okay, 12 weeks. Oh, well, that's also unconstitutional. Oh, okay, well then, and then it just kind of goes up from there, which is in every other court. I mean, that's been found, like Roe states that anything before viability is legal. So then there's a lot of precedent for that. So it's going to cost taxpayers a lot of money. And one of the things that Tennessee Right to Life doesn't like is that groups like the ACLU or Planned Parenthood historically are the ones that kind of lead in the lawsuits and recover some of the costs from those lawsuits
from the state.
Yeah, whoever, I don't know where the money comes from, but yeah, I guess whoever pays our lawyers in the end.
Yeah.
We just think it's a terrible idea. So, but I think there was like another thing in Missouri where it was like they required both parents to sign parental notification. I mean, we already have parental notification laws here. Yeah. I think somebody asked about, are they going to do anything about judicial bypass, which is a protection here in Tennessee if a young person needs to go to the courts to kind of, if they can't go to a parent for whatever reason, they can go to the court. Yeah, petition the court. There were a lot of things that were personhood, I've heard, might be something that's on it. There have been lots of, but it's all rumor. We don't really know what they're going to do.
Right. I mean, how can it be anything else but like a political stunt to not have any of these details actually worked out, and you call this press conference and basically you get a photo op, right, with almost every single Republican legislator in back of the governor talking about abortion. I
have to say I was really disappointed. I mean, I don't have a similar value or view as Governor Lee anyway. I'll say that, but I did kind of think that maybe there was some strategy or thinking behind like his policy making. And so when he did that this year, I was like, okay, that's different.
You're such an optimist, Francie. You're always hoping for the best.
Okay.
That's different, but actually the same.
I'm going to really push out this bill that we don't even have. Like, that is,
Yeah, it's strange.
And the weird thing is, weird/terrible, is, he was up there with, what is William Lamberth's title? Like, he's a leader, and anyway, he was up on stage and he basically called us murderers, like people who have abortion murderers. And it just stuck in my craw because I'm like, we are women who have had miscarriages, so we know what it's like to grieve over a fetus that we were really looking forward to delivering. We're the ones that have stillborns. We're the ones that give up our children for adoption. We're the ones that carry the pregnancy. We're the ones that choose to terminate. Like, we know what it's like to carry that level of responsibility, and to hear him say so callously and call our base of supporters and people who share our view as murderers. It allows for that kind of extremism across the state. And I think I was also disappointed in that level of alliance with folks that I just think are very fringe and well off the mark of what I think is in the best interest of people.
Sure. I mean, very well said, by the way. I think we all feel that way. It's also not a stretch to say that these laws punish specifically only women.
Right.
Because if they were really interested in the well-being of the child, if they were really interested in families or anything that actually was not about women, they would understand that it literally takes two people to create
a village,
pregnancy.
actually.
A village. But for there to be a pregnancy. And there's never anything about the men in this situation. And that's so archaic, and it's so just unbelievable that in 2020 we still have. I mean, if you looked at that stage and the picture on that stage, there were maybe 3 women, and out of 30, and all of the rest of them were white men.
Yeah.
And so it's really troubling at that level.
Yeah.
There's so much that can actually be done to, again, help families and reduce the number of unintended pregnancies, or help young people know when they're going through puberty, that understand the changes in their body and how pregnancy occurs and how to respect their bodies and how to make sure that other people respect their bodies. Like, there's so much that work that needs to be done on that level.
Yeah.
Like, why aren't we doing that?
Right.
And so it's really frustrating.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know I'm not telling you anything.
No, you're absolutely right. There's a lot that can be done. And I guess I'm impatient for that as well. Like, I have been doing this a long time, and within and beyond Planned Parenthood's view, like, there's so much work to be done. There's so much work actually to be done to make our lives better and to support each other. Politics aside, like, just a little empathy and understanding would go a long way. And to me, like, a lot of these policies are really made to kind of, it's like a gotcha, versus like, let's really think about what we can be doing together. This is like a public challenge to legislators across the aisle. Like, we have a bill that's promoting maternity care. Folks are invited. I mean, we are a nonpartisan organization. I mean, we invite everybody to help support these values, for sure. Absolutely.
And there is nothing that's more satisfying than when the two sides work together to actually produce good legislation that helps the people of the state. And nobody in that instance gets 100% of what they want, but it's moving in the right direction. And we all want that. We really do.
Right.
Well, most of us.
I want to share
most of us want that.
This letter, if this is okay. To read.
Yes.
So, there's lots of reasons to, I think, honor a person's private medical decisions, from a medical standpoint, from a legal standpoint. And one of the things that we also want to highlight is that parenthood and intentional parenthood and making sure that young people are cared for is part of that value. And so, in response to Governor Bill Lee, we created this open letter for parents and caregivers and families to sign on to, because as one of the reproductive justice organizations said, like, everybody knows somebody who's had an abortion. Everybody loves somebody who's had an abortion. And so
including those 30 people that were standing up on stage with Bill Lee.
Yes. Actually, it was interesting at the 6-week ban, that the public hearing that happened last summer, one of our folks had a "Everybody Loves Someone Who's Had an Abortion" T-shirt, and one of the folks from the opposition came up and was like, I like your shirt. I feel like there's a place for us to connect in terms of, like, really seeing each other as humans and respecting the policies that will value bodily autonomy, for sure. So we wrote this letter, and people are signing on. It says, "Dear Governor Lee, we, the undersigned, are called on by our lived experiences as parents, caregivers, and family members to stand up for the dignity and autonomy of pregnant people. We have lived through typical and complicated pregnancies, and we are raising children we love deeply. We oppose all attempts to criminalize and restrict abortion access. 1 in 4 Tennessee women will need an abortion at some point in their lives, and we understand how difficult this decision can be. Many of us have had abortions ourselves. In fact, 59% of people who have had abortions already have a child. Our reasons are our own, made in deep consultation with faith, family, and medical providers. At no point did we ask our governor or state legislator for an opinion. When a person does decide that abortion is their best option, they need community support, not obstacles preventing safe access to medical care. These bills will not eliminate abortion, but will force pregnant people to turn to unregulated and often dangerous attempts to end their pregnancies, and force pregnant people to become parents, including survivors of rape and incest. Rather than force people to have babies, our state lawmakers should focus on broadly popular ideas to support new families, such as paid leave, access to affordable care, and reasonable accommodations for pregnant workers. As parents, caregivers, and family members, we often fight on behalf of our children while putting our own needs aside. It's time for us all to recognize that abortion access is a critical issue for current and future families. We trust people who are pregnant to make thoughtful, moral decisions and urge our state leaders to do the same. And folks can sign that. They can go to bit.ly, so bit.ly, bit.ly/family for choice. So the numbers of the 4. So family, the number 4, choice, family for choice. And then they'll take it to that link and they can sign it. And probably sometime in March, we'll go and deliver it to the governor, and folks are invited to join us so he can read this.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Do you know how many signatures you have?
I don't know. I know the first day we put it out, we had 150, and I haven't looked back at the link since. So,
Okay,
yeah.
great. And what's the date again that you'll deliver it? March?
I'm not sure. We'll be on the Hill on February the 25th.
Yeah,
so.
let's talk about that,
Yeah.
because usually organizations have one day on the Hill.
Yeah.
Where they go up and they have all their volunteers and citizen lobbyists go to the Hill and meet with their legislators to talk about the issue. You have 4 this year.
Absolutely. Yep. We had a day on the Hill in January. We just had a day on the Hill this past Tuesday. We have another one on February the 25th. And I want to say it's March 10th as our
And what happens
fourth
on
one.
those days?
So on those days, having been an organizer that's kind of, helping embolden people so they can understand the political process, nothing educates a person more than going on the Hill. I can describe to folks like what it feels like, because maybe this power imbalance or whatever is like a theoretical thing. But when you have a legislator that you're trying to talk with, either hear you or not, that is very educational.
And the stories are
Yeah.
legendary
Yeah,
of
yeah.
legislators listening and not.
Yeah. I mean, and I think it
I'm
helps
sorry.
demystify. It demystifies that
Yes,
relationship.
it does.
Yeah. It helps people know that you have a right to talk to your legislator, and the good ones are folks that actually help build that relationship back. Because you want to be the person that they can call up and go, "Hey, I'm thinking about this thing. What do you think? How will it impact your life?"
Right.
So I'm sorry. Were you going to say
No,
something?
I was going to say something incredibly cynical, but so I'm just not going to say.
Oh, okay.
No, it's not cynical, actually. I'm going to say it. It's amazing to me how many legislators forget from which their power is derived. Mm-hmm. So when you have citizens and people, their constituents, going up to the Hill and sometimes being treated in a not very welcoming and even negative and antagonistic way, it's just amazing to me that happens.
Yeah.
You're elected by the people. So anyway, that was my thing I was going to say. Thank you, Francie Hunt.
You're welcome.
For joining us today on the If You Don't Know, Now You Know, TNDP podcast. And let me just say thank you for all your good hard work.
Absolutely. Thank you for all of your hard work. I love listening to the podcast, and folks can go to tnadvocatesforpp.org or pptnm.org. Follow us on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, all those things, to know what we're doing. We'd love to have people involved. And thank you for inviting me to talk with you today.
Awesome. Until next time.
Okay.
Thanks for listening. You can find out more about the show at tndp.org/podcast. Follow us on Instagram at TENN Democratic Party and on Twitter at TNDP. This show is distributed by We Own This Town. And don't forget to check to make sure you're still registered to vote at sos.tn.gov. If you're not registered, you can go there and do that too. So do it.